reborn to the day my fiancé's childhood sweetheart could read my mind. I kept a deadpan face and started making up utter nonsense in my head. Play the full story in one go. Don't forget to like, comment, share, and subscribe. The exciting story begins right now. The excruciating pain of being torn apart from my loved one still seems to linger in every fiber of this body. I suddenly open my eyes, my fingers digging desperately into the armrest of the rosewood chair beneath me, as cold sweat instantly soaked through my undershirt. Gone was the nauseating stench of blood from the dark room, and gone too was the hair-raising sound of a blade scraping against bone. Zhiyin, are you feeling okay? A male voice, as smooth and mellow as jade, rang out in the hall. I slowly raised my eyes. My gaze passed through the wispy smoke of incense rising into the air and settled on the young man sitting across from me. Chu Mingyan. He was clad in a moon-white brocade robe adorned with cloud patterns. With his gentle eyes and brows, he truly embodied the grace and refinement of a young gentleman from a distinguished family. Standing half a step to his side was a young girl with her hair styled in twin buns, dressed in a simple, plain-colored blouse and skirt. With her eyes cast down, she resembled a delicate, pitiful little white flower. Lu Wanwan, his childhood friend. I closed my eyes for a moment, forcing down the overwhelming hatred welling up inside me. Memories from my previous life exploded in my mind like a kaleidoscope. It was this very fiancé of mine, who spouts nothing but righteousness and morality, who was secretly recruiting followers in order to seize the wealth and confidential contact list of my marquis's household. When I caught the slightest hint of his scheme, he didn't hesitate to team up with Lu Wanwan to lock me away in a dark room. I will never forget that day when Chu Mingyan personally severed the tendons in my arms and legs, torturing me to death one cut at a time. Meanwhile, Lu Wanwan stood to the side, covering her mouth with a coy smile. As I lay on my deathbed, my blood nearly drained, she leaned down, whispered in my ear, and boasted triumphantly, "Sister Jiang, did you really think that by hiding the key to the treasure map and the registry deep in your heart and clinging to it so tightly that you wouldn't let go, we wouldn't be able to find it? You didn't know, did you? As long as I'm near you, I can hear every single thought in your mind crystal clear. So that's how it is." No wonder all my schemes in my past life were so accurately anticipated by Chu Mingyan, and no wonder the spies I had planted were uprooted completely. They tortured me not only to vent their anger, but also to force my mind, under the torment of extreme fear and agony, to uncontrollably recall the whereabouts of the key to the secret chamber. Little Zhiyin? Seeing that I didn't answer, Chu Mingyan furrowed his brow slightly, his tone tinged with concern and a hint of tentative inquiry. I snapped back to my senses, took a deep breath, and picked up the Jian Kiln rabbit hair tea bowl beside me to hide my trembling fingertips. When I looked up again, a dignified and gentle smile had settled on my face. "I'm fine, I just didn't sleep well last night." I set down my teacup and let my gaze drift lightly toward Lu Wanwan. "Chu Lang mentioned earlier, who is this young lady?" Chu Mingyan's expression softened. He stepped forward half a step with Lu Wanwan by his side and sighed. "This is my distant cousin, Wanwan. Her family has fallen on hard times, and now she's come to the capital, all alone and without anyone to turn to. I had intended to take her in at our estate, but my mother is rather old-fashioned. Since you've always been so kind-hearted and you're my fiancé, I was wondering if you might let Wanwan stay at your marquis's estate for a while." What a high-sounding excuse. In my past life, I fell for his lies, let the wolf into my home, and allowed Lu Wanwan to uncover every secret of the marquis's mansion right under my nose. I looked into Lu Wanwan's timid eyes. Although she had her head down, her gaze kept drifting toward me involuntarily, and her ears twitched ever so slightly. She's listening to my innermost thoughts. I sneered inwardly, but my face betrayed just the right amount of pity. She's just the daughter of a down-and-out family, though she does have a sly, seductive look about her. Chu Mingyan shoved her into my mansion, but don't let her bring that stench of poverty into my home. I deliberately brought this caustic, snide inner monologue vividly to mind. The next moment, I clearly saw Lu Wanwan's body stiffen suddenly. A flash of humiliation and embarrassment crossed her normally delicate, vulnerable face, and even her fingers, clenched around the silk handkerchief, turned pale and bluish. Sure enough, she could hear it. This is truly wonderful. Since heaven has given me a second chance at life and even let me discover her wretched supernatural powers, wouldn't it be a waste of the agony, the 1,000 cuts and 10,000 slashes they inflicted on me in my past life if I didn't make the most of this opportunity? Since you're Chu Lang's cousin, that makes you my sister, too. I smiled gently, my tone affectionate. The Marquis's mansion is large enough. One extra side room won't make a difference. Just settle in comfortably, Sister Wanwan. Lu Wanwan forced a smile and curtsied. Thank you, Miss Jiang, for taking me in. When Chu Mingyan saw that I had agreed, a hint of joy flashed in his eyes. He picked up his teacup to clear his throat, just as he was about to praise me once more for being so considerate. As for me, while maintaining a gentle gaze, I began to make things up in my head with a straight face. Last night, my father was drunk and accidentally let slip that, in a secret compartment in his study, he kept not only the tokens that could control the 12 money houses of Jiangnan, but also a certain ledger. He said that as long as one got hold of that ledger, even the current Minister of War could be manipulated at will. I stared intently at Lu Wanwan's face. Just as she was about to lift the teacup, her hand trembled violently. A drop of scalding tea splashed onto the back of her hand, yet she seemed oblivious to the pain. She jerked her head up and fixed her gaze on me, her eyes brimming with uncontrollable ecstasy and shock. The Minister of War, that was the key court official Chu Mingyan had been desperately trying to win over but had been unable to. If he could get his hands on some incriminating evidence against him, it would undoubtedly give Chu Mingyan's plot to rebel a huge boost. It's just a pity, I sighed, continuing to talk to myself in my mind. Father said the mechanism of that secret compartment is extremely dangerous. If you try to force it open without knowing the proper method, a projectile coated with a poison that kills on contact will be fired from inside. Even when he goes to retrieve something himself, he has to be extremely careful and first twist the purple clay pen holder on the desk 3 times to the left. Clang! Lu Wanwan, overcome with excitement, slammed the tea lid down hard on the teacup, producing a piercing clang. Wanwan, what's wrong? Chu Mingyan furrowed his brow and shot her a slightly disapproving look. Cousin, I'm fine. Lu Wanwan swallowed hard, doing her best to suppress the tremor in her voice, but the look she gave Chu Mingyan was filled with urgent implication. I just suddenly felt a tightness in my chest. I'm afraid I'm just tired from the journey. Chu Mingyan was such a perceptive man that he immediately understood the implication in Lu Wanwan's eyes, that she had something extremely important to report. He stood up, bowed slightly toward me, and said with an apologetic expression, Zhiyin, since that's the case, I'll take Wanwan to the side room to settle her in and let her rest first. And while I'm at it, I'll go to the market to buy her some daily necessities. I won't keep you any longer today. Take your time, Mr. Chu. I stood up and personally escorted them to the hall door. As I watched Chu Mingyan and Lu Wanwan hurry away, almost as if they couldn't wait to leave, the gentle expression on my face cracked bit by bit, replaced by an icy coldness. After seeing Chu Mingyan and Lu Wanwan off, I didn't pause for even a moment. I turned, dismissed my attendants, and walked straight into my father's study. My father had been ordered to inspect the West Mountain encampment and would not return home for another 2 days. The study was silent, with sunlight streaming through the window lattice and falling on the large rosewood desk. I walked over to the desk, and my gaze fell on the purple clay pen holder. As a sensitive area within the home mansion, it certainly wouldn't be as frivolous as I just imagined in my head. There is indeed a secret compartment in the study, but it doesn't contain any evidence of treason. Rather, it's where my father used to store his old military notes from years ago. As for that mechanism, turn 3 times to the left, it's nothing more than an ordinary latch. There are absolutely no poisonous needles capable of causing a fatal wound. But I have to pull off this act flawlessly. I pulled a yellowed ledger from my sleeve, one I'd hastily forged just moments ago upon returning to my room, using an old, discarded ledger of my father's. For the handwriting inside, I deliberately used my left hand to imitate the cursive script commonly used by merchants in the Jiangnan region. The contents of the ledger were half true and half false. Not only did it record the fabricated amounts of military rations embezzled by the Minister of War, but it also subtly pointed to the imperial household department as the ultimate destination of that silver. The inner court bureau was the domain of Rong Hechuan, the chief eunuch of the current administration. Rong Hechuan, a man whose power extended throughout the court and beyond, was ruthless in his methods, a poisonous blade hanging over the heads of all court officials. If Chu Mingyan truly believed he had found a way to hold the Minister of War over a barrel, and sought to use that leverage to win him over or even blackmail him, he would inevitably crash headlong into the thorn-covered iron wall that was Rong Hechuan. I carefully placed the forged ledgers into the secret compartment, put the purple clay pen holder back in its original position, and then smoothed over all traces. After finishing these tasks, I slipped quietly out of the study and vanished into the shadows of the corridor. As night fell, the lights began to come on in the home mansion. I sat on the soft couch in my bedchamber, holding a scroll of Guisu in my hands, the candlelight casting a long, narrow shadow of me. Outside the window, the water clock ticked steadily. It was just past the third watch when a night crow flapped its wings as it swept past the treetops, letting out a hoarse, low caw. Here it comes. I tilted my head slightly and, through the half-open lattice window, watched coldly as two dark figures scaled the courtyard wall surrounding the study like ghosts. The one in the lead was tall and slender, even though he was clad in night attire. I recognized him by his deliberately subdued gait. It was Chu Mingyan. Following behind him was a petite figure with unsteady steps, clearly Lu Wanwan, who had no martial arts training. Chu Mingyan was indeed naturally suspicious. He didn't even trust his own secret guards and insisted on bringing along this childhood friend who could hear people's thoughts to verify the matter himself. I slipped on a black cloak, avoided the palace guards on night patrol, and crept silently around to the rockery behind the study. Through a crack in the rockery, I could see everything that was happening inside the study. Chu Mingyan didn't light his candle. Instead, he felt his way to the writing desk by the faint moonlight. He was clearly being extremely cautious. Rather than reaching for the purple clay pen holder right away, he glanced back at Lu Wanwan. Wanwan, are you sure it's 3 turns to the left? Chu Mingyan's voice was kept extremely low, betraying a hint of unconcealed tension and greed. Don't worry, cousin. I heard it loud and clear. Whatever Sister Jiang has in mind is definitely true. Lu Wanwan's voice carried a hint of eagerness to take credit. She said that if she makes a mistake, a poison needle will be fired. Please be very careful, cousin. Chu Mingyan took a deep breath and rested his hand on the purple clay pen holder. 1 lap, 2 laps, 3 laps. With a soft click, the secret compartment slowly sprang open in the still of the night. No poison needles. No hidden weapons. Chu Mingyan let out a long sigh of relief and eagerly reached into the secret compartment, pulling out the ledger I had carefully prepared. By the faint moonlight streaming in through the window, he hurriedly flipped through a few pages. Although I couldn't make out his face at that moment, I could clearly hear his breathing suddenly becoming heavier. It really is the Minister of War's ledger. Great. Just great. Chu Mingyan couldn't help but chuckle softly as he pulled Lu Wanwan into his arms. Wanwan, you truly are my good luck charm. With this in hand, I have no doubt we'll succeed in our great undertaking. Lu Wanwan nestled against his chest and said in a sweet, girlish voice, as long as it helps my cousin, I wouldn't hesitate to give my life. But, what if Sister Jiang discovers that the ledger is missing? What should we do then? It doesn't matter. Chu Mingyan sneered, his tone brimming with contempt and coldness. Jiang Zhiyin is nothing more than a dull, sheltered woman. So she found it, so what? With the Marquis of Jiang stationed far away at the West Mountain camp, what kind of trouble could she possibly stir up? Besides, the Grand Princess's flower viewing banquet is just a few days away. I'll find a way to make her look foolish at the banquet. By then, she'll have her hands full. She won't have the time or energy to worry about what's in that secret compartment. Talk about having your hands full. I stood behind the rockery, feeling the coolness of the night breeze seep through my cloak, a mocking smile playing at the corners of my mouth. After making off with their loot, the two didn't dare linger. They carefully concealed the secret compartment and climbed over the wall to leave the same way they had come. Early the next morning, before the morning dew had dried, I had just sat down in front of the bronze mirror, letting my maid Cui Zhu help me get ready. when I heard the announcement from outside the door. "Young lady, Miss Liu has come to pay her respects to you." I lowered my gaze to hide the coldness in my eyes and said calmly, "Let her in." The curtain parted, and Lu Wanwan walked in carrying a bowl of steaming bird's nest porridge. Today she was wearing a pink tunic and skirt that was neither brand new nor worn out. Though her face showed some signs of fatigue from staying up late, her eyes shone with remarkable brilliance, and her every feature, from the corners of her eyes to the tips of her eyebrows, radiated an unmistakable air of triumph. "Sister Jiang, did you sleep well last night?" Lu Wanwan gently set the bird's nest porridge on the table and said in a soft, gentle voice, "Wanwan is deeply grateful for your kindness in taking me in. So I went to the small kitchen and simmered this porridge myself. I hope you won't find it unpalatable." "That's very thoughtful of you, Sister Wanwan." I picked up the porcelain cup, stirred it gently with a silver spoon, and gave her a half smile, half scoff. "Since you've just arrived, if there's anything you need or are missing, just let the steward know. In a couple of days, the Grand Princess is hosting a flower viewing banquet at her country estate. I was just worried about having no one to accompany me. Why don't you come with me and see what the world has to offer?" Lu Wanwan's eyes lit up, and she quickly curtsied to express her gratitude. "Thank you so much, Sister Jiang, for your support." She was standing very close to me, her eyes fixed on me. She was clearly pricking up her ears again, waiting to hear my innermost thoughts. I scoffed inwardly, but put on a pensive expression, clearly thinking to myself, this flower viewing banquet is a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity to make an appearance. When the crown princess was young, she had a lover who loved to wear a moon-white robe and always carried a jade pendant engraved with the words "Winter Plum" at his waist. Later, he was killed in battle, and the crown princess came to regard the winter plum as a taboo, forbidding anyone from mentioning it openly. Out of the corner of my eye, I caught the slightest flicker in Lu Wanwan's gaze. But in reality, the crown princess had never stopped thinking about that person. I once heard my mother say in private that if anyone were to appear at the flower viewing banquet wearing moon-white robes and recite a poem praising the winter plum blossoms, the crown princess would surely regard that person as a kindred spirit, not only bestowing a generous reward, but perhaps even adopting them as her adopted daughter. Today, I've had a moon-white tunic and skirt hastily made. I absolutely cannot let anyone else snatch this tremendous opportunity away from me. In my mind, I spoke those words with the utmost conviction. Upon hearing this, Lu Wanwan's breathing instantly quickened. She clenched the silk handkerchief in her hand tightly, her eyes blazing with intense greed and ambition. The crown princess's adopted daughter. If she could latch onto the crown princess's influence, Lu Wanwan would not only be able to completely shake off her humble origins, but she could even outrank me, the legitimate daughter of a marquis's household, in status. By then, my cousin would surely look at her in a whole new light. "Sister Jiang," Lu Wanwan suddenly spoke up, her voice tinged with a hint of impatience. "Wanwan just remembered that I still have some embroidery left to finish in my room, so I'll take my leave now. Please enjoy your meal, sister." With that, she couldn't even wait for me to nod before hurriedly turning and walking out. Watching her back as she practically jogged away, I casually poured the untouched bird's nest porridge I was holding into the flower pot next to me. "Go on, Lu Wanwan. Go prepare your moon-white robes, and go recite your poems about winter plum blossoms." The crown princess did indeed once have a male favorite who always wore a winter plum blossom, but that man was by no means some idealized love interest. He was merely a petty villain who sought to harm the princess and was greedy for power and wealth. To dare mention Han Mei in front of the Grand Princess is to publicly humiliate her. I'll just have to see what kind of huge stir you can stir up at this flower viewing banquet. 2 days later, at the Crown Princess's country estate, it was a crisp, golden autumn day. The fragrance of osmanthus filled the private garden, where noble ladies and matrons, dressed in exquisite garments and adorned with pearls and jewels, graced the grounds. The Crown Princess was the Emperor's full older sister. To put it bluntly, this flower viewing banquet was a venue for the capital's powerful and influential to network with one another, and even to seek marriage alliances, in pursuit of fame and fortune. Today I wore a water-red brocade skirt woven with gold thread, and in my cloud-style hair, I wore only a single filigree enamel ruby hairpin that swayed with my movements, neither too flashy nor too understated. perfectly capturing the dignity and grace befitting the legitimate daughter of a marquis household. In contrast, Lu Wanwan, who was walking beside me, could be described as going to great lengths. Just as I had expected, she had changed into a long, moon-white satin gown. The skirt bore no superfluous embroidery. Only a silver-threaded sash at her waist accentuated her slender figure. Most exquisite of all, she wore no gold or jewels in her hair, only a lustrous white jade hairpin shaped like a plum blossom. Amid the crowd of young ladies vying for attention with their dazzling finery, her appearance was truly serene and ethereal, like a solitary, proud white lotus. Is this the cousin Miss Jiang brought to the capital? She's dressed a bit too plainly, don't you think? A few familiar noblewomen standing nearby covered their mouths and whispered among themselves, their eyes betraying a mix of scrutiny and disdain. Lu Wanwan walked right beside me. Although she heard the whispers, she kept her back straight, her chin slightly raised, and a determined gleam in her eyes. She probably felt that sparrows could never fathom the ambitions of a swan. Once she took first place before the Grand Princess and became the imperial family's adopted daughter. All those who were now mocking her would have to kneel at her feet and kowtow. I lowered my gaze to hide the cold smile playing at the corners of my lips, then led her to a seat in the front row of the ladies' section. Before long, the eunuch's loud chant rang out, and the Grand Princess, flanked by her retinue like a moon surrounded by stars, gracefully made her way to the banquet hall. Though she was over 40, her face was well preserved, yet her eyes and brows bore the weight of years of authority and severity. She cast only a casual glance around the room, and the once boisterous villa fell instantly silent. Please, everyone, have a seat. We're here today simply to enjoy the autumn scenery, so there's no need to be so formal. The Grand Princess lifted her purple clay teacup, her voice steady and measured. The banquet proceeded according to plan, featuring nothing more than refined pastimes such as the arrow-throwing game and poetry recitation. Chu Mingyan sat at the men's table, his gaze occasionally drifting toward the women's section. When he saw Lu Wanwan's outfit, he furrowed his brow ever so slightly, seemingly thinking that dressing so plainly on such an occasion was unbecoming. However, out of deference to the occasion, he said nothing. After 3 rounds of wine, the atmosphere grew lively. The Crown Princess set down her wine cup, let her gaze sweep over the young men and women below, and said with a touch of amusement, "The flowers in this garden are blooming exceptionally well this year. It's just a pity that they're always the same old clichés, peonies and chrysanthemums. They get boring after a while. Is there anyone among you younger generation who can come up with something fresh and original?" As soon as she spoke, the room fell silent. The Grand Princess was putting them to the test. If they could catch her eye, it would naturally be a golden opportunity to rise rapidly through the ranks. Immediately, several young men and women from prominent families stood up and recited a few poems filled with praise and flowery language. But after listening, the Grand Princess merely awarded them some trinkets with little enthusiasm and showed no significant reaction. Seeing that the atmosphere was getting a little awkward, Lu Wanwan, who was sitting next to me, took a deep breath. Here it comes. She sprang to her feet and, amid the astonished stares of the crowd, lifted the hem of her moon-white gown and walked lightly to the center of the banquet hall. She knelt on both knees, performed a perfectly executed deep bow, and spoke in a voice as clear as a nightingale's song. "I, Lu Wanwan, a commoner's daughter, have taken the liberty of presenting a poem to your highness." The Grand Princess's gaze fell upon her moon-white gown and the white jade plum blossom hairpin adorning her hair, and her eyes instantly grew cold, as if a layer of frost had settled upon them. The atmosphere around them grew inexplicably oppressive, but Lu Wanwan, lost in her dream of soon rising from humble beginnings to become a princess, was completely oblivious to the danger. She even quietly turned her head and glanced in my direction, her eyes brimming with defiance and smugness. I sneered inwardly, but on the surface I put on a look of shock and anxiety. What on earth is little Wanwan up to? When I saw her wearing that moon-white dress this morning, I couldn't bring myself to wear one, and now she's actually... Could she have heard my inner thoughts last night and be trying to steal my position as the Crown Princess's confidant? It's all over. This is a real secret my Marquis's household worked so hard to uncover. If she steals the spotlight from me, how am I ever going to explain this to my parents? The voice of my heart is like a cry of despair. Upon hearing these words, Lu Wanwan's shoulders, which had been slightly tense, instantly relaxed, and she couldn't even help but let a barely perceptible smile play at the corners of her mouth. She was convinced that my anger and resentment at that moment were the best proof of her impending triumph. Read it aloud for me to hear. The crown princess's voice betrayed no emotion, but the inflection at the end rose slightly, carrying a hint of chilling detachment. Lu Wanwan looked up, her eyes clear and determined, and read aloud in a clear voice. I seek no praise for my beauty. I only wish to fill the universe with my pure fragrance. Though the garden is ablaze with autumn colors, I, a humble maiden, love only the winter plum blossom which blooms alone in the cold. Silence. A deathly silence. The banquet, where there had been some hushed whispers, seemed to fall completely silent the moment the words cold plum blossom were uttered. The slightly older noblewomen and court officials present turned pale in an instant and didn't dare even breathe. Chu Mingyan's hand, which had been holding a cup of tea, froze suddenly. He didn't even notice the scalding tea spilling onto the back of his hand. He stared in shock at the reckless woman in the center of the room, unable to believe his ears. Lu Wanwan, however, still believed that everyone was awed by her talent. She tilted her chin slightly upward, adopting an air of haughty aloofness, and waited quietly for the grand princess's praise. Smack! With a sharp crack, the eldest princess slammed the purple clay teacup in her hand down hard at Lu Wanwan's feet. Scorching tea mixed with shards of broken porcelain splashed onto the hem of her skirt, leaving unsightly brown stains on her moon-white plain brocade gown. What a magnificent winter plum blossom, blooming alone in the cold! What a magnificent sight, filling the entire universe with its pure fragrance. The crown princess sprang to her feet. Her well-preserved face was now contorted with terrifying murderous intent, and she shouted harshly, "Guards! Arrest this insolent servant who doesn't know when to keep her mouth shut." Several burly maids immediately pounced on her like wolves or tigers and pinned Lu Wanwan to the ground. "Your Highness, why are you doing this?" Lu Wanwan was pinned to the ground, her delicate cheek pressed against the cold stone slab, her face filled with shock and terror. She struggled desperately, turning her head toward me without a second thought, her eyes brimming with a plea for help and confusion. Shouldn't I be green with envy? Why is the crown princess so furious? I rose to my feet calmly and methodically, dabbed at the corner of my mouth with a handkerchief, walked to the center of the banquet hall, knelt down with a thud, and spoke with just the right amount of fear and self-reproach. "Your Highness, please calm your anger. Although this young woman is a distant cousin of my fiancé and is staying at my marquis's residence, I never imagined she would dare to commit such an act of treason in your Highness's presence. I have failed to discipline her properly, and I deserve to die 1,000 deaths." With that single remark, I cleaned out the whole mansion from top to bottom and, in the process, completely ignited Chu Mingyan's fury. The grand princess's icy gaze, like that of a venomous snake, immediately swept toward Chu Mingyan in the men's section. "Chu Mingyan? Is this the person you brought with you?" Chu Mingyan turned deathly pale and immediately scrambled over to the dais, where he knelt on the ground with a thud. "Your Highness, please understand. This servant has met this girl only once. Seeing how lonely and helpless she was, I entrusted her to the Jiang family. I had absolutely no idea she harbored such malicious intent and was deliberately trying to offend your Highness." He was trying to distance himself from her. The man who, in his previous life, would have severed the tendons in my arms and legs for Lu Wanwan's sake was now, faced with power and influence, casting aside his own flesh and blood without a second thought. "Cousin! You!" Lu Wanwan stared at Chu Mingyan in disbelief, her face smeared with a mixture of tears and dust. She seemed to finally realize that the inner voice promising to lift her to the top was nothing but a trap from start to finish. She struggled to stand up and point the finger at me, but the matron slapped her hard across the face, and blood immediately began to flow from the corner of her mouth. "Gag her, drag her away, and beat her to death with sticks." The crown princess waved her hand dismissively in disgust, just as the old nurse was about to stuff the ragged cloth into Lu Wanwan's mouth. Chu Mingyan, who had been kneeling beside her, trembling with fear, suddenly looked up. A flash of ferocity and resolve crossed his eyes, and he shouted, "Your Highness, I have urgent news to report. The reason this wretched servant dares to act so arrogantly is that she is being instigated by someone. Last night, in a secret compartment in Marquis Jiang's study, I discovered a ledger." As soon as those words were spoken, the entire room erupted in an uproar. "Wait a minute." The crown princess narrowed her eyes slightly and raised her hand to stop the matron who was about to drag Lu Wanwan away. Her armor, adorned with crimson lacquer, tapped lightly against the armrest of the rosewood chair, producing a chilling, crisp sound. "You just said that you discovered something in Marquis Zhang's study. What was it?" As if clutching at his last straw, Chu Mingyan hurriedly crawled forward on his knees 2 steps, pulled the ledger from his sleeve with both hands, and held it high. "Your Highness, your humble servant accidentally stumbled upon incriminating evidence hidden by the Jiang family, this very ledger. It clearly records the amounts of military rations embezzled by the Minister of War over the years. The Marquis of Jiang had hidden it in a secret compartment in his study, clearly intending to use it to blackmail high-ranking officials of the court, form factions for personal gain, and plot treason." Chu Mingyan's voice echoed through the grand hall, each word resonating with force and a sense of righteous conviction. I knelt a short distance away, listening to his words that twisted the truth, and scoffed inwardly time and again. In my past life, it was with this very same hypocritical facade that he had enjoyed the full support of my Marquis's household while secretly plotting to have my entire Jiang family executed. Now, in order to save himself, he had no qualms about pinning the label of plotting treason on my father. "Chu Lang, what nonsense are you spouting?" I jerked my head up. My eyes instantly welled up with tears, and I stared at him in utter disbelief, my voice filled with anguish. "My father spent his entire life in military service and was utterly loyal to the imperial court. How dare you make such slanderous accusations? To clear yourself of guilt, you've even gone so far as to fabricate such false testimony? Zhiyin, at this point, are you still trying to make excuses?" Chu Mingyan looked at me with deep anguish, acting just like a loyal minister sacrificing his own kin for the greater good. I, too, once held the Marquis in high regard, but I personally retrieved these ledgers from the secret compartment, the one rigged with traps, in his study. The evidence is irrefutable. How could I possibly let personal feelings jeopardize the welfare of our family, our nation, and our people? The head matron attending the Grand Princess stepped forward, took the ledger from Chu Mingyan's hands, and respectfully presented it to the Grand Princess. The room fell deathly silent. Everyone's gaze was fixed intently on the Crown Princess's hand as she turned the pages of the ledger. The officials who were on good terms with the Minister of War were now drenched in cold sweat. The Crown Princess casually flipped through a few pages. At first, her gaze carried a hint of casual scrutiny, but when her eyes fell on a few lines of small print toward the end of the ledger, her expression suddenly changed. She slammed the ledger shut, her knuckles turning pale from the force, and shot a piercing glare at Chu Mingyan that cut like a knife. "Have you ever looked at this ledger?" Chu Mingyan assumed that the Crown Princess was enraged by the scale of the Minister of War's corruption. Overjoyed, he hastily knelt and said, "After I retrieved the documents last night, I only gave them a cursory glance. Realizing the gravity of the matter, I dared not conceal it. I had originally intended to submit them to the Supreme Court of Justice after tonight's banquet. Fortunately, Your Highness is here, so I have taken the liberty of presenting them directly to you." Well, you certainly don't dare to hide anything." The Crown Princess laughed bitterly in her rage and slammed the ledger down on the table. "I had no idea you, Chu Mingyan, possessed such audacity." The smirk on Chu Mingyan's lips froze instantly. He looked up in confusion, not understanding why the Grand Princess would react this way. "Why are you so angry, Your Highness? How is it that such a lively banquet has taken on such a somber and ominous atmosphere?" Just then, a soft, melodious voice, yet one that carried a bone-chilling chill, drifted slowly in from outside the private garden. Everyone looked in the direction of the sound and saw a squad of inner court bureau guards, dressed in flying fish robes, file in single file and quickly fall into formation on either side. Immediately afterward, a young man with a pale, beardless face, clad in a crimson python-patterned robe, walked slowly into the hall. He idly fiddled with a string of agarwood prayer beads in his hand, and his narrow, upward-slanting phoenix-eye gaze held an unyielding, menacing intensity. Rong Hechuan, the eunuch in charge of the imperial household department. The room was filled with guests, including several members of the imperial family, and the moment they saw this person, they all instinctively held their breath. The Grand Princess's expression shifted slightly. She forced herself to suppress the apprehension in her eyes and said coldly, "Since Director Rong is not in the palace attending to His Majesty, how does he have the time to visit this princess's country estate? His Majesty, out of consideration for your highness, has specially ordered the servant to deliver 2 pots of rare chrysanthemums from the western regions, recently presented as tribute." Little did I expect that, just as I arrived at the gate, I would overhear people discussing ledgers detailing the corruption of high-ranking court officials. Rong Hechuan's lips curled into a faint, ambiguous smile as his gaze drifted lightly to the ledger on the desk. Might this humble servant have the privilege of taking a look? The Grand Princess did not stop him, or rather, she did not dare to stop him. Rong Hechuan walked over to the desk, picked up the ledger with his long, pale fingers, and began to leaf through it leisurely. I buried my head even lower, digging my fingernails deep into the palms of my hands, struggling to suppress the blood surging through my body as I trembled with excitement. He. In the deathly silent hall, Rong Hechuan's hoarse laughter suddenly rang out. He closed the ledger and casually tossed it to his trusted aide standing behind him, his gaze resting on Chu Mingyan as if he were looking at a lifeless object. "Prince Chu, did you steal this ledger from Marquis Zhang's residence?" Rong Hechuan's voice was soft, yet it carried a chilling, bloodthirsty edge. At that moment, Chu Mingyan finally sensed that something was off. "Your Excellency, please understand. This humble servant only sought to expose the Jiang family's crimes. I had no other intentions." Chu Mingyan knelt and bowed his head in panic, his voice trembling uncontrollably. "Expose?" Rong Hechuan gently stroked the Buddhist prayer beads on his wrist, a smile growing increasingly cruel at the corners of his mouth. "How bold of you, young Master Chu, waving around a forged ledger you found in some back alley, daring to publicly slander an imperial official in public, and even attempting to frame the imperial household department. Chu Mingyan, do you think the blade in my hand isn't sharp enough? Or do you think the 9 clans of your Chu family aren't enough to be slaughtered?" As soon as those words were spoken, Chu Mingyan felt as if he'd been struck by lightning, and his whole body went limp as he collapsed to the ground. "Fabrication? A frame up against the Imperial Household Bureau?" He whipped his head around to look at me, his eyes bloodshot with sheer terror. It was only at that moment that he finally realized it wasn't a ladder to the heavens at all, but a grave the Jiang family had dug specifically for him. I lifted my tear-streaked face, revealing just the right amount of shock and heartbreak as if I'd suddenly realized something. "Seize this madman who forged the ledgers with the intent to disrupt the imperial administration. Take him to the imperial prison, and interrogate him rigorously," Rong Hechuan said, waving his hand lazily. Several fierce-looking thugs immediately rushed forward and pinned Chu Mingyan down as if he were a lump of mud. Lu Wanwan, who had been slumped motionless beside him, so terrified she'd even forgotten to cry, finally let out a desperate scream. She simply couldn't understand why. Even though she had clearly heard a top-secret revelation, the outcome was that her cousin would be thrown into the imperial prison and she herself would be beaten to death with clubs. As for this lowly servant who has offended His Highness, the Grand Princess shot Lu Wanwan a cold glance and frowned in disgust. "Drag her out and have her beaten to death immediately." The farce came to an abrupt end when Chu Mingyan was thrown into the imperial prison and Lu Wanwan was beaten to death with clubs. The flower-viewing banquet at the Grand Princess's villa ultimately became a bloody secret that the capital's powerful and influential figures kept strictly under wraps. I rode back to the home mansion in the family carriage. Inside, it was dim and quiet. Cui Zhu, still shaken, huddled in a corner, not even daring to breathe, leaning back against the soft cushions. I slowly wiped away the fake tears from the corners of my eyes with a handkerchief, and at last, a carefree, cold smile curled at the corners of my lips. In a past life, Chu Mingyan climbed to the top of the world by trampling over the bones of my entire Jiang family. In this life, I will make him taste the agony of being unable to live or die in that sunless dungeon. However, this matter involves Rong Hechuan, which was a risky move from the start. With Rong Hechuan's cunning, almost demonic intellect, he is bound to sense that these ledgers appeared far too conveniently. But I am certain he will not call me out on it, because although the ledgers are forged, they provide him with a perfectly legitimate pretext to purge his political rivals. 2 days later, my father returned from an inspection tour of the Shishan camp. Before he had even had time to change out of his court robes, my father strode into the main hall, his face ashen. Clearly, he had already heard about what had happened at court on his way back to the city. Zhiyin, come with me to the study, my father ordered in a low voice, suppressing his anger. As soon as the study door closed, I gathered my skirt, bent my knees, and knelt heavily before my father. Please calm your anger, father. I am at fault. Without waiting for my father to ask, I spoke with tears welling in my eyes, delivering the prepared explanation I had long rehearsed. A few days ago, I happened to notice that Chu Mingyan was always lingering near the study. He had even secretly bribed the old woman who sweeps the courtyard. Suspicions arose in my mind, yet I feared I might be wronging him. So, plucking up my courage, I used my left hand to imitate the handwriting of a merchant from Jiangnan and fabricated a ridiculous ledger, which I placed in the secret compartment to test him. I looked up, tears falling at just the right moment, my voice choked with the deepest anguish. Who could have known that he truly harbored such wicked intentions? Not only did he steal the ledgers, but he couldn't wait to frame father in front of the crown princess. If the contents of those ledgers hadn't been so preposterous that they enraged Inspector Rong, I fear the Jiang family would be facing a terrible catastrophe by now. It was I, your daughter, who let the wolf into our home and nearly brought ruin upon the entire family. Please, father, punish me. My father's initial mix of shock, anger, and fear instantly gave way to deep concern when he saw me looking so remorseful and heartbroken. He strode forward, helped me to my feet, and sighed deeply. My foolish child, how could this be your fault? If you hadn't been so quick-witted and tested him, I'm afraid I would have been kept in the dark by that scoundrel for the rest of my life. The Chu family is nothing but a fallen house. I only betrothed you to him because I saw he had some talent. But who would have thought he'd turn out to be such an ungrateful wretch? A cold, resolute gleam flashed in my father's eyes. Those ledgers implicate the Imperial Household Department. Now that Chu Mingyan has been imprisoned in the Imperial prison, not even a divine immortal could save him. I shall write a letter at once and send it to the Chu family to call off this marriage once and for all. The legitimate daughter of the Jiang family must never have even the slightest connection with such a rebel. It's entirely up to father, I replied meekly, and a huge weight was finally lifted from my heart. Once the marriage contract was revoked, the shackles that had bound me in my past life were finally and completely severed. Just then, the butler's slightly trembling voice suddenly rang out from outside the study. My lord, someone from the Imperial Household Department has arrived. They say Director Rong has something he wishes to personally bestow upon the eldest young lady. My father's expression suddenly changed, and he instinctively shielded me behind him. When officials from the Imperial Household Department came calling, it never meant anything good. The door swung open, and a eunuch dressed in brocade entered, carrying a rosewood tray. The eunuch's face was as white as paper, and his smile sent a chill down one's spine. Greetings, Marquis Jiang. I have been sent by the director to present a return gift to Miss Jiang. A return gift? My father asked in a low voice, forcing himself to suppress his apprehension. My daughter has spent her entire life secluded in her chambers and has never had any contact with Inspector Rong. How could there be any question of a return gift? The eunuch didn't answer. He simply walked straight up to me and swept aside the red silk covering the tray. The moment I saw what was on the tray, my breath caught in my throat. It was a white jade plum blossom hairpin, the very one Lu Wanwan had worn in her hair just 2 days earlier. But now, the lustrous white jade was mottled with dried, dark red bloodstains, which, in the candlelight of the study, exuded a chilling, bone-chilling aura of death. The commissioner said that Miss Jiang is exceptionally clever and played her part in using others to do her dirty work to perfection. However, although the handwriting on the forged ledgers was sloppy, it was written with the finest white ink, the kind that ordinary merchants would never be willing to use. The eunuch's voice was shrill, yet every word struck my heart like a sledgehammer. This blood-plum hairpin was a gift from the commissioner to Miss Jiang. The commissioner also asked me to convey a message. The eunuch paused, narrowed his slanted eyes slightly, and fixed his gaze intently on me. No matter how brilliant the play may be, if you slip up, it could cost you your life. Young lady, let this be a one-time exception. My fingertips felt icy, and a cold sweat instantly broke out on my back. Rong Hechuan, not only did he see right through Chu Mingyan as a scapegoat, but he also knew full well that I was the one pulling the strings behind the scenes. He was both warning me and letting me know that I had caught his eye. Your humble servant, humbly thanks the commander for this gift. I bit my lower lip tightly, slowly knelt down, and accepted the blood-stained plum blossom hairpin with both hands. A few days later, the carriage rolled smoothly along the bluestone-paved road, but the once lively cries of street vendors outside the carriage had gradually faded away at some point, leaving the surroundings eerily quiet. I clenched the handkerchief in my hand tightly. Before I had a chance to pull back the curtain to see what was going on, the carriage came to a slow stop. The door was pushed open from the outside, and a faint, cool scent of incense wafted into the carriage. Rong Hechuan, dressed in a raven-black casual robe and accompanied by no attendants, calmly stepped into the carriage and sat down across from me. He continued to twirl the string of prayer beads in his hand, a hint of inscrutable amusement hidden in his narrow, phoenix-like eyes. Are you on your way to Xianghua Temple to fulfill a vow, Miss Jiang? Rong Hechuan's voice was calm and measured. Is it to celebrate that Chu Mingyan had both his legs broken in the imperial prison? Or to celebrate that your scheme to use others as tools to kill him managed to fool the entire world? My back tensed instantly. Suppressing the fear in my heart, I lowered my gaze and said, this humble servant does not understand what the director is referring to. Chu Mingyan brought this upon himself. I merely narrowly escaped a disaster. Narrowly avoided? Rong Hechuan chuckled softly, though the smile didn't reach his eyes. Jiang Zhiyin, I've presided over the trials of countless death row prisoners in the Imperial Court of Justice. I know human nature better than anyone. Your attitude toward Chu Mingyan changed abruptly after that high fever half a month ago. Not only did you know the anniversary of the Grand Princess Yu Bai Han Mei's death, but in that forged ledger, you even listed the exact amounts embezzled by the Minister of War over the years, down to the last coin. A woman confined to her boudoir could never have uncovered such information. He leaned in slightly, closing the distance between us, and an oppressive atmosphere hung over me like a dark cloud. You've been moving cautiously, always one step ahead of Chu Mingyan, cutting off his retreat at every turn. You've even factored our family's reaction into your calculations. When you act, there's no hesitation, only certainty. It's as if you've already seen through the ending of this play, down to the very last detail. I dug my fingertips deep into the palm of my hand. My face turned slightly pale, but I clenched my teeth and said nothing. Rong Hechuan suddenly stopped fingering his prayer beads and spoke in a somber tone. Ancient texts record that there are extraordinary individuals in this world who reincarnate in another's body or, having survived the ordeal of death, come to know their past lives. Miss Jiang, do you have any idea what would become of the entire Ho family if I were to report your prophetic and uncanny behavior to His Majesty? He tricked me. He didn't have any concrete evidence, but relying on scant clues and his terrifyingly sharp intuition, he laid bare the most absurd yet most realistic possibility right before my eyes. Cold sweat trickled down the side of my forehead. The horrors of my past life flashed through my mind. I knew that in the presence of someone as cunning as Rong Hechuan, whose intelligence bordered on the supernatural, any attempt at evasion or panic would only serve as irrefutable evidence of my guilt. Since there was no way out, I might as well face death head-on and find a way to survive. I slowly raised my head and looked straight into his menacing eyes. My voice surprisingly calm. If I were to say that I am indeed a malevolent spirit who has crawled back from Avicii hell to claim a life, what would you do, Commander? Would you immediately grind my bones to powder and scatter them to the winds to eliminate any future threat? This is the first time I've ever spoken openly about the secret of my rebirth. There was a moment of dead silence in the car. Rong Hechuan gave me a deep look, then suddenly dispelled the murderous aura surrounding him. Leaning back against his pillow, he said casually, "I don't believe in ghosts or gods, only in political maneuvering. Whether you're human or a ghost, I don't care. But since you truly possess such supernatural abilities, I cannot allow you to wander the streets. From this day forward, your life falls under the jurisdiction of the Imperial Household Bureau." He paused, his gaze suddenly becoming as sharp as a knife, radiating the unquestionable authority of the imperial throne. "However, this realm belongs to His Majesty. I must be certain that you, this evil spirit, will not turn against the imperial family. Speak, tell me of a critical matter concerning the imperial family that is about to occur. If it proves true, you will be worthy of serving as my weapon, but if it is mere nonsense—" "Autumn hunt," I interrupted him without hesitation, speaking very quickly. In his previous life, it was precisely at the autumn hunting ceremony at West Mountain, which was to take place 3 days later, that a major incident occurred that shook both the court and the country. It was that very incident that allowed Chu Mingyan to earn merit by saving the emperor amid the chaos. And from then on, his career soared. Rong Hechuan narrowed his eyes slightly. "What about the autumn hunt?" "In 3 days, during the autumn hunt at West Mountain, the Dewan Sweatblood steed presented by the Prince of Qi will go berserk the moment His Majesty mounts it. And hidden within a secret compartment of that saddle is a silver needle coated with a deadly poison that kills upon contact with blood." I fixed my gaze intently on Rong Hechuan. "The Prince of Qi harbors treacherous intentions. He plans to assassinate the emperor. If the director does not believe me, you are welcome to secretly inspect that saddle in advance. A single inspection will reveal the truth." A subtle change finally flashed across Rong Hechuan's face. The Prince of Qi had always appeared to be a law-abiding man. The accusation of regicide was a capital offense punishable by the execution of 9 generations of his family. Unless one truly possessed the ability to foresee the future, who would dare to make such baseless accusations? "Good. Very good." Rong Hechuan looked deeply into my eyes, a dangerous smile curving his lips. "Jiang Zhiyin, you'd better pray that your words of the past are true. In 3 days, if the saddle is not poisoned, I will come personally to take your head." With that, he stood up, pushed open the carriage door, and stepped out with a smooth, decisive motion, as if he had never been there at all. Exhausted, I leaned against the side of the car, gasping for breath. The unusual events surrounding the autumn hunt at Xishan turned out to be even more harrowing than I had anticipated. 3 days later, at dusk, the fiery clouds on the horizon were as red as blood. All 9 gates of the capital were suddenly placed under martial law, and the deafening sound of hooves shattered the silence of the long streets. In less than half an hour, the Prince of Qi's mansion was heavily surrounded by the Imperial Household Department and the Imperial Guard, and all 300 or so residents of the mansion were imprisoned. The charges were intent to assassinate the monarch and treason against the sovereign. That night, someone gently tapped on the window lattice of the study from outside. I set down the teacup in my hand, which had long since grown cold, and pushed open the secret door. Rong Hechuan, clad in a jet-black cloak, appeared silently before me. After days of bloodshed and slaughter, the scent of blood clinging to him was so thick it seemed almost impenetrable. Yet his narrow, phoenix-like eyes flickered with an intensity and sharpness I had never seen before. There was indeed a silver needle dipped in crane's crown red hidden beneath the saddle. Rong Hechuan cut straight to the point, sitting down on the Wangwali wood chair and casually tossing a black iron token onto the table. His Majesty was most pleased. Not only did he strip the Prince of Qi of his title, but he also entrusted me with full authority to reorganize the Imperial Guard. "Jiang Zhiyin, you evil spirit, you've certainly presented me with a gift of immense significance." I looked at the black iron token, on which was engraved a single, simple character, shadow, with a dark red blood groove running along its edge. "The Overseer has deigned to grace us with his presence tonight. Surely it isn't just to thank this humble maiden." I did not touch the token, meeting his scrutinizing gaze with a calm expression. "As I've said before, if you can prove your worth, I'll allow you to play a role in the grand scheme of the Empire." Rong Hechuan's lips curled into a meaningful smile as his fingertips tapped lightly on the table. "Chu Mingyan breathed his last in the imperial prison today, so the grudges from your past life have been thoroughly settled. But the storms brewing in the capital have only just begun to stir. The emperor needs a pair of eyes hidden within the mansions of the powerful, and the Imperial Household Bureau needs a secret agent who knows the heavenly secrets. He leaned forward slightly, his voice low and alluring. Miss Jiang, in the dreams of the past, you were nothing more than an ignorant woman trapped within the confines of the inner quarters, at the mercy of others. Now, do you wish to continue embroidering and brewing tea here in the Marquis's mansion, waiting to be arbitrarily matched with some brute to spend the rest of your wretched life? Or do you wish to take this token and go out to see this magnificent yet treacherous and ever-changing realm? My gaze was fixed intently on that dark iron token. In my past life, I was confined by Chu Mingyan to a tiny corner of the inner quarters. I exhausted myself over trivial mother-in-law and daughter-in-law disputes and the rivalries among concubines vying for favor, only to end up with my entire family executed and to die in utter humiliation. The misery of those women in the inner quarters was like an invisible net that tightly bound my horizons. In this lifetime, driven by a quest for revenge, I have unexpectedly torn away the facade of this golden age and caught a glimpse of the blood-soaked, heart-stopping power struggles for the throne. What Rong Hechuan has given me is not merely the identity of a secret agent, but a sharp blade with which I can truly control my own destiny and even sway the course of the empire. I took a deep breath, reached out without hesitation, and clenched the cold, black iron token tightly in my palm. Your Majesty, I, your humble daughter, am willing to serve you and the governor with all my strength. I raised my head. My eyes no longer held a trace of the timidity typical of a woman confined to the inner chambers. Instead, they were filled with the resolute determination and clarity that come from having faced life and death. Very good. Rong Hechuan slowly stood up, looking down at me from above, and a hint of genuine appreciation finally flashed in his eyes. Jiang Zhiyin, don't let me down. With that, he turned and vanished into the night, leaving behind only a chill night breeze. I stood alone by the window, clutching the rough-edged token, gazing out at the majestic imperial city shrouded in the night. In this life, I am no longer anyone's wife, nor am I a caged bird confined to the inner quarters. I am the sharpest hidden blade of the Yuan dynasty, and in this chess game of political intrigue, I will make my moves without regret. That's the end of the story. Thank you for listening. Please subscribe, like, share, and leave a comment. Thank you.